Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the number one most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello, and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. We are joined by Eamonn Filinski, who, in his own words, has, in the past 10 years, been immersed in technology, specifically sales and a bit of marketing, and has been jumping in and out of sales ops between kind of marketing and sales management roles. So I think it's going to be a super interesting interview. Eamonn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tom.
Let's kick off with the first question. How did you initially get into sales operations the first time you did it?
Oh, that's a good story, probably. I think it like many people, I probably kind of fell into it. I don't think it was necessarily a path I thought of. It was many years ago with a small tech company called NetMail. And I started my career as a sales developer and working into a sales role, but always kind of had a passion for the analytics and numbers behind what we were doing. I think that's just the way I think and the way I love to look at things. So I was always, the one kind of building my own reports and getting my own analytics, my own information. And within a small company, word gets around pretty fast that someone's doing this and someone can rely on this person to do this. So kind of organically, slowly but surely, I was the person to go to build a report or get some more information. And at the time, this was many years ago, we were using a CRM called Sage Sales Logics, very archaic kind of system. I'm sorry for anyone that's still using that out there, but we were going in a transition to Salesforce at that time. And so when we didn't really have a traditional sales operations person within the company, it was kind of under IT. So I was kind of the one pointed at to lead that transition into the world of Salesforce in our new CRM. So kind of got dropped into sales operations organically because I was, definitely just focusing on numbers and analytics a lot and kind of just grew into the role from there in that small company. And that led to a passion of being in that world for the next 10 years.
Got it. And I love what you say about when you were being an SDR, you were just the person who was like, probably your sales manager was like, oh, Eamonn's building the reports again. And then word spreads and then you start kind of moving organically. It really makes sense. And I've seen that happen here. Cool. And so that first role was at NetMail.
Yeah.
And then you transitioned from there to Hootsuite.
Yeah. That's when I had an opportunity to go work for a growing company, Hootsuite at the time, and really scale their sales development department. So my whole time at NetMail, I wore many hats. I was in sales development, sales leadership, a company of like 50 people. You kind of do many different jobs, and then grew into a traditional sales ops role eventually, and then had opportunity to go back and run and manage a sales development department. But I think the theme throughout that whole thing was I came into that role with kind of a sales operations outlook to that role as well. And still at my time at Hootsuite, in the 3 to 4 years I was running the sales development team, was the de facto sales operations person, even though that wasn't necessarily my title for that, where again, was the person relied upon to, dig into the numbers and understand a little bit more about systems. And definitely, I love sales technology and the tools we use and have a passion for that. So was the one kind of leading the charge for our new technologies that we're using and the tools that we went out and prospected with. And so along that time, we didn't necessarily have a dedicated sales ops person again for our departments, and the sales ops team was just growing at Hootsuite. So it was very leaned heavily upon to kind of build out that sales operations process and what we were doing within the sales development team. And then that led to an actual sales ops role after 3 or 4 years of being in Hootsuite, where we really needed a focus on our sales tools and technology, because like many companies that were growing, we threw a lot of money at technology, got a lot of tools, and some of them worked out really good. Some of them were laying dormant, and there was this big hodgepodge of sales technology that we were using and not using, and there needed to be someone to go in and draw that process more to the technology and start building out what we needed, what we didn't, reduce our spend, obviously, because we were just spending all over the place, and kind of clean up that whole entire process. And so then I spent a lot of time doing that near the later years, half of my time at Hootsuite.
Got it. And if we fast forward to today at Achievers, you're currently, are you the most senior resource in sales operations?
Not really. I'd like to say, I guess in sales operations. So I guess what's different, and big reason why I came to Achievers, is we're building out a revenue operations department. And that's what I really loved and what really drew me to what was going on here. So the person above me, she's the director of revenue operations and is running, I guess traditionally it could even be maybe a chief operating officer. So we're really building out a larger than sales operations. So yeah, I head up sales operations, but then we're starting to, bring in marketing, we're bringing in customer success, we're bringing in more IT things, and really being the hub of revenue operations. And I love that. Like, we have a team of 9 or 10 people now, but we're growing it out and probably to 15 people, let's say, in the future. And then just building out everything from sales operations to sales enablement, engagement, and training, and then analytics and reporting and BI and everything in between. Got it. So we have the head of revenue operations, or we have the chief revenue officer at the top, right? Yeah. We'd have at the top, we'd have reports up to sales now-ish, but eventually there will be more of a COO that would be in the realm of reporting right to the CEO on the leadership panel. Got it. And then you have a senior manager within marketing, success, and sales that all report up into that person. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. And then when you said you're going to a team of 15, was that the RevOps team or was that the sales ops team? That would be the RevOps team. I think overall, like there's some gaps that we have in all aspects of the game. I think it is a good framework right now, but now we just need to amplify that a little bit more because, everyone on the team is kind of under constraints of a lot of work being done right now without a lot of people. So I think we just need to amplify that a little bit more with the amount of people power we have behind it. Got it. And then how many, I guess, because you have success reps, you have the marketing team, and then you have the sales reps as well. But just if we forget about the others, how many sales reps are you responsible for? Sales reps in our department, we have about 20 account executives. We have about 9 or so SDRs. So we have a 2-to-1 ratio of SDRs to account reps. And then our CS department is around 25 or so. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. That's good to get an understanding of. Moving on, the sales tech stack that you're currently using. Yeah, something that, like I said, I'm definitely very passionate about and spend probably way too much time after hours reading into the latest tech and what's out there. So we use at a base Salesforce, our CRM. And then from the sales side, we're using Outreach for our sales automation. We use LinkedIn Sales Navigator for prospecting. We use Discover.org for data supplementation with the sales team. We use Chorus, something we just recently started using for call coaching and recording, which love that whole space, whether it's Chorus or Gong, and just the ability to review and manage that call structure, something I wish I had probably 10 years ago when I started. We're using WebEx for meetings and conference calls, using Tableau for a lot of our dashboards and analytics, as well as Salesforce. DocuSign for contracts. We're actually using Lean Data for lead routing and management of that lead path and cycle. And that's kind of one of those interesting tools that kind of bridges marketing and sales. It was a marketing-led purchase, if you will, but then it's a sales use tool. So that was definitely a very good example of why RevOps is important, because there's these tools that kind of transverse both departments, and you need to, I think, have a central spot where they live, and you can't just have one tool on one side and being used on the other side. So Lean Data is something very much like that, and even something like Drift, which we're not using yet, but would be one of those tools as well. It's like used by sales, but usually purchased by marketing. Using Litmos for our LMS and trading, using Sigster recently just for those sales signatures and getting information out there. And then in marketing, Marketo, Visible, ZoomInfo, Path Factory, G2 Crowd, and probably a couple other I'm forgetting, but that's generally the marketing stack starts with Marketo and things like ZoomInfo to aggregate and enhance the data that we have in our system as well.
Yeah, got it. Data quality, does that fit with your team?
Yes, and it's something that we're actually looking into quite often, as many companies probably are. But I think a particular challenge I saw when I came in here is that Achievers has been around in a couple different iterations for about the last 13, 14 years. So it's not very old, maybe if people are working for more established companies, but in the tech world, to me, that was pretty old. So there was a lot of data and a lot of information that kind of has gone through many different processes. So it has been very important, especially when we're trying to look back and get an idea of conversion rates and consistency and forecasting right now, because it's almost looking at those layers of growth within a rock, and over time you see the lines. It's hard to look back and compare different years in different segments of the business because they weren't all the same, right? So that's something we're trying to do right now, compare that data and see where the commonalities are and try to look in that data consistency, like how do we actually get better at forecasting? How do we get something consistent going forward, as well as how do we prove in the past that will work with what's working today? So the data overall is something that it's a pretty big project to centralize the data. It's something like Tableau, get into a data repository, a data lake, and get it in one spot as well, because it kind of lives in many different iterations. And then also try to get that consistency over time.
Got it. And then now shifting to your relationship with the sales reps, do you have any, I assume you've onboarded quite a few SDRs in your time. Mm-hmm. What have been your key learnings from doing that?
That everyone's different, I guess. That would be the first thing. I think having a cookie cutter approach to onboarding or teaching anyone a process, I think is not a great idea. I think you need definitely a stable platform. You need a good repeatable process is very important, but you need to know who you're teaching. Difference between SDRs and AEs and CS and the level of experience and just how someone wants. I think the first thing I always ask is how do you like to learn? How do you like to absorb information? Because everyone is different. Some people love to just work on a whiteboard and see some sort of visual and work through the process. Other people just like to discuss things. Some people want to just sit down with the information, absorb it a little bit more, and then go back to it later on. So I think that's a big part of it, just understanding who you're teaching and who you're instructing. And then making it very clear.
Sorry to quickly jump in there. How do you run a test at the start of the process to understand the type of person, or do you observe them and then tweak as you learn more about them?
I think I sit down if it's reasonable with individuals or groups and just understand who they are. Sometimes just, I guess through my experience in working with people, knowing a little bit of who they are, like the difference between an entry level person and, an AE that's been in this market for 15 years and is kind of that old dog new trick mentality. But if I can, I think asking them quickly before we even start, just at the beginning of the session, like, how do you like to learn? What's the best way for you to absorb this information?
Got it. And then, sorry, I cut you off. I think you're about to share something else.
Yeah, I was saying, I think it's important as well just to have that scalability in what you're doing and making sure that they understand what it means to them. I think that's the other crucial point. Like, especially when you're dealing with more established sales reps or people that have been in the business for a while, I think they're going to pay less attention or not adapt to something if they don't understand what it means to them individually and how they're going to benefit from it. So I think that's a huge piece of it of if you're teaching a new process or how to deal with, opportunities or something in the system or launching a new sales tool. It's great to say it's going to benefit the company. It's going to do all these amazing things. Or too often, I think I've even got caught up in saying, well, sales ops will benefit from this because we'll have all this data and we'll know how to do things better. But in the end, people care what it's going to mean to them. So what does it mean to that individual? How will that AE benefit from this tool? How will they up their numbers? How will they be more efficient? And how will it make their lives better?
Cool. So you're kind of answering one of my next questions, which is about buy-in. And so you're basically saying that in order to get someone to do something, you really have to try and communicate clearly why they should be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important just to make sure they know. Oh, they have to also know, what the result is to the business and why we're doing this in general, because that's important as well. But I think to really get someone to adopt to it day to day, something like Chorus, we just rolled that out, and telling the team, like, it's going to be great. We're going to be able to work with you, get all this analytics and coaching and information about our calls and be able to review calls. But what does that mean to them? I think we kind of doubled back after saying that because we had some blank stares, but telling the team that you'll be able to review your own calls. Like, you'll need to take less notes and spend more time active listening with your customer rather than, writing things feverishly down on your call, and also be able to go back to your calls and better yourself and review your calls and see the weak points in your call and have better communications with your customers. And then ultimately, hopefully having, better, stronger deals that you're closing. So when we kind of add that aspect rather than the benefit to the company or the leadership, I think they adopted it a little bit more.
Got it. What are you currently doing to make your reps more productive?
I think what we're trying to do is automate the points in the process that are kind of monotonous and are just clicks and filling in fields and filling information that doesn't need to be done as much as possible, with an air of knowing that there needs to be human input in some points. So focusing on, like, our CRM, a simple exercise of counting the number of clicks it takes to go through a process and trying to understand, okay, to create an opportunity or fill out this form or do this thing we're asking them to do, how many clicks does it have and how many steps does it have? How do we reduce that? Because too often I think we're designing process. It seems like a great process. You're like, well, this gets all the information we want, but we don't really think about the user experience as much, right? So really trying to focus on that. And we know with, we're rolling out, Lightning for Salesforce as we speak this week and going into the future, and doing things like that, knowing that in order to get adoption of this new landscape of CRM that seems so foreign to a lot of people, we know we need to make those processes that much easier so that it flows that much easier. So that's something in terms of efficiency that we're really focused on. Like, how do we take out that monotony of just those simple small tasks and just make them easier? And then things like using outreach and setting up, proper sequences and cadences so that, the idea of their outbound prospecting can be set up as a framework, and they can spend more time customizing their messaging, thinking about their research and who they're writing to, and less about, the follow-up tasks and those type of things, and remembering to reconnect with someone and just have that be more automatic.
Got it. And I totally agree about the point you make that the analytical operations person builds a process and they're like, oh my God, this is so amazing, I'm getting everything. But then you put a salesperson through it and they get really angry because he's wasting their time. So I think that's super important. Sales forecasting, are you responsible, or does that sit with finance?
Not responsible. It sits in revenue operations in general. I think it's something we all kind of have a piece in. I think I'm involved more on the extraction of data and serving that data up to our leader of the revenue ops department, and then she would sit on the executive table and talk about what the forecasting is. But definitely involved in gathering that information and those numbers.
Got it. So you take the data from within Salesforce, pass it to this person who will then review it with the C-level. Do you not review the forecast with the individual sales managers or sales reps? Or is that someone else?
No, I don't personally. We do that within the department, though. We're reviewing it on weekly cadences and weekly calls, and then also serving up that data to the sales leadership. Then they're obviously sitting through one-on-ones and working through that data, that forecast. But it sits on a weekly call with VP of sales and sales managers, revenue ops director, and other sales leadership, and they work through those forecasts.
Got it. Makes sense. So your role is really the custodian of the data, ensuring that it's right in Salesforce, and then it gets to the people to make the decisions.
Correct. Yeah. A big part of what we're doing right now is forecasting. It's not just opportunities. We're really looking into like that lead waterfall, if you will, or that transition of what's coming in, what's converting, and what's the output of that, and doing a deep analysis of that, because it's a place where we realize we could improve a lot. And like I said, looking at that historic data, it's hard to compare against the past because there has been so many changes in our business over the years. So we're spending a lot of time analyzing that, and that's part of that forecast as well. Like, not just the end pipeline, but what's coming into the pipeline throughout the whole sales cycle, from MQL to SQL to opportunity and beyond.
Got it. Yeah. So not just looking at what's going to close this quarter, going back in the funnel to look at all the like MQL to SQL. Awesome.
Exactly.
KPIs in your, I think over 10 years experience kind of in sales management / operations. What's been the most insightful metric that you like to track?
Whew, that's a good question. Because like I said, I love data and I love metrics. I think if I were to think about definitely the different groups, it matters. Like between SDR and AE and CS, they're definitely very different. I've always been a huge fan in the SDR world of looking at conversion rates across the spectrum, but not focusing on the end result and working your way back. I think that's important. I don't like to look at activity in the beginning and just drive activity, saying you need to make phone calls and emails, and that's all that matters. I think it's thinking about, okay, what is the end goal for an SDR? Let's say it's an opportunity or a sales qualified lead, and identifying that number and then trying to break down what those conversions are at each step before that, and then trying to find out where the gap is. I think when I'm looking at KPIs for SDRs, if you have that full spectrum of that process, you can look through each step and see where it's breaking, whether it's not enough volume of activity or not enough qualification of leads and not speaking to the right people, or just we're not converting those people when we do speak to them to qualified leads. So and it's kind of a non-answer, but I'd say look at the full spectrum of that process, because I think you need to deep dive into a specific KPI to see where it's broken. You can't just look at one.
Got it. Yeah. So it's actually a set of metrics that you think is insightful. And then finally, who has taught you the most about sales operations?
I don't know if there's one individual. I was actually trying to think of this before the call. I think it's been, there's way too many people, I think, across my years of sales operations I've dealt with. I think to nail maybe more of a persona, I think that the idea that I started in a sales role and then had an opportunity to mix and live in these roles and have experience, I felt like that was the best learning experience for me, that I had firsthand knowledge of these roles. And whether you've actually done them for your actual title and your role, or you sat down for a couple of days and sat beside someone and shadowed them, I think it's wildly important within sales operations to get firsthand knowledge of what people are doing that you're interacting with. And I think that's been the biggest learning point, or where I've gained the most knowledge from, being in these roles or sitting down with people and really understanding firsthand knowledge of how they do their job and what it means to them, and then trying to take that back and work that into my day-to-day sales operations role.
Got it. Yeah. And we used to ask the question on this podcast about, is sales experience necessary for sales ops? And the answer wasn't unanimously yes, but it was unanimously that it's helpful, because you have more respect from them. You obviously understand what they're going through. So I totally agree. Eamonn, that was awesome. I have a few things that I particularly enjoyed. Having understanding that people learn in different ways and are different as they come through the onboarding to basically make your onboarding process more effective for different individuals. I like for the last two questions, actually, when we talked about forecasting and your favorite set of metrics, both of the answers were kind of looking back in the funnel and looking at, especially for the SDR, like what the process is from just data to MQL to SQL, and then trying to tweak the different steps. And then the understanding the difference between a sales person's view of a process and a sales ops person's view of a process, and how you actually need to come somewhere in the middle so they're happy and you're getting the data. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Tom. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.